Yeah, and you're really a great teacher. So today, I would love to talk about some of your teachings around masculine and feminine, as well as embodiment, because I definitely help a lot of people with embodiment, and I've noticed too that a lot of people do detach, and especially when they're in a gym setting and when they're doing
Mm,
exercise. And I try to get people to be in their bodies more and think about how their bodies feel, and just kind of start there. But what I've really loved about working with you, Maddie, is that you kind of took it a step further for me and helped me realize that that I was, over the years suppressing a lot of things as an athlete, just because you have to build up a certain amount of resilience to get through things. As well as the sport I was in was gymnastics, so you're being judged, and so your emotions do matter in what you're presenting. So again, learning to really suppress emotions, just out of uh, because of it's, a function of the sport, and you're supposed to really remain really calm all the time and
mm,
tough. So I had kind of trained myself into that. So then when I think I started feeling things, or when feelings would come up, it made me feel really uncomfortable. And so it was really hard to embody, because I felt like, oh gosh, I'm weak. And it's something that I need to like hold down, because I feel like it's, maybe I'm weak if I'm showing, this shadow part of myself. And come to realize that it's just, later, that actually it's healthy to express that part of yourself. It's actually unhealthy not to do that, and we really need to feel these feelings and let them move through, as we'll talk about probably today, as it relates to the feminine. And so my process was like, oh God, so where I'm at now is I'm starting to get a lot more comfortable embodying some of these feelings, but still there's times where it feels super awkward. And I'm working with that to try to really get into a place where I can be okay with, however people respond or react to what I'm doing, in a
mm.
way that, is in a safe container, as you say. So I really just wanted to start the show off with a little bit of kind of what I've been through, and my work with you, and how you've helped me open up to really being okay with just, showing those parts of yourself that you may be embarrassed about or shameful about, in the past, and kind of embracing those parts and being okay with, letting those out. And it actually, it's kind of funny how it kind of feels good to do that. Once that happens. So welcome to the show, Maddie. This is Maddie Moon. I didn't really introduce you yet. We just kind of got right into it, but that's just how the show goes sometimes. So, but I do want to just do a real quick formal introduction for you before we get started, because those of you who don't know Maddie, she is pretty amazing. So I want to really just give her props here and let you know who she is. And she's been on our show before. With that being said, I want to introduce you to Maddie Moon. She is a walking permission slip, a soul igniter, and devoted teacher. Her mission is to help you unify all the pieces that make you you, including your feminine with your masculine, light with your dark, introvert with your extrovert, and your doing with your being. Through transformational experiences such as coaching, shadow work, spiritual healing, polarity, and feminine masculine embodiment, Maddie will warmly guide you to see the beauty of what exists right now in this wildly beautiful and messy thing we call life. Isn't that the truth? Her work and story has been featured in hundreds of podcasts, as well as various publications such as the Huffington Post, Teen Vogue, Thought Catalog, Nylon Magazine, the Daily Mail, Vice, Greatest, Men's Health, People, and the ABC News Nightline. Through her weekly podcast, Mind Body Musings, online platform, maddymoon.com, and ongoing retreats, thousands have come to self reclamation and feminine embodiment. So thanks, Maddie, for coming on the show, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such a beautiful introduction, and I want to go all the way back to what you were saying about being a gymnast, and just like honor you for that, because that's definitely and very deeply stored inside of your nervous system that like, oh no, emotions are coming up. Now it means that I have a job to do. Like, it's not just, oh, emotions are coming up, let them flow. It's like, now there is a job, there is a mission. It is to hide it. And I
Yes.
imagine after time that becomes absolutely exhausting for your nervous system. Every emotion that's unexpected or deemed as weak in your body,
Mm.
hide the emotion, hide it, hide it. So I just wanted to honor you for that and how far you have come. I sometimes forget that you are a gymnast. I think you've told me a couple times, and yeah, that's just a totally different world that I'm unfamiliar with, but can also see there's so many synchronistic parts of being in that world, just aligned with being a woman or just being raised in a particular family where parts of you aren't acceptable. So yeah, and then side note, like, yay, I'm happy to be here. This is great to be here for a second time. I'm so delighted.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here too. And yeah, and it's interesting because I think everybody, it'd be really great for everybody to just look back on your history and just see, okay, how did this develop, and maybe we don't know at first that what's exactly happening. And so that's part of like what I would like to dive into today as, the embodiment factor, and as well how learning more about the masculine and feminine energies have really helped me in my own life, and how they could possibly, how you help people understand that better. I know what I've learned is like that, it's they kind of are oscillating between one and the other. Like, we're not just masculine all the time, we're not just feminine all the time. It depends on what type of environment we're in. For example, when I'm at work and I'm helping someone, I'm holding space and I'm listening, and so I'm more my masculine. And then when I'm at home, I like to be more of my feminine with my husband. And so that's just a small example of where you could go with it and how you think of it in your life. But I'd really love to kind of expand a little bit more to get started here with what your definition, Maddie, of a healthy masculine and feminine expression would be, and how we
Mm-hmm.
can embody that,
Okay, here we go.
as
Gotta
opposed
say.
to unhealthy, I guess I would say.
Well, yes. So let me do my spiel here. Um, I have learned from the David Data lineage. And so if anyone is not familiar with him, he wrote an amazing book called The Way of the Superior Man, Dear Lover, quite a few books. And I've worked with various teachers from that lineage, two of them that I work with currently. One's name is John Wineland, one name is Kendra Kunov. And a lot of the teachings that I'm going to share, I've learned through my experiences with them too, and it comes from that family and of that lineage. So I like to honor that, even though I bring my own flavor to it, and I talk more about certain aspects than they do and less of other aspects. But I just like to honor that. Okay, so one thing that I want to make very clear is that the feminine and the masculine energies live within everyone. We all have varying degrees of both, and we get to decide on a moment, any moment, moment to moment, what we want to have more of. And it's never the correct answer or the wrong answer, it's really just what we want. So if you are a female that feels like you're primarily in your masculine, there's nothing wrong or right about that. And if, as long as you are aware of it and you have sovereignty with it, like, oh yes, I'm mostly in my masculine, yes. And it's not like I'm always in my masculine and I can't ever. You want to be sovereign over whichever energy you're choosing to live the majority of your life through, and use it. Because being a female primarily in your masculine, or vice versa, being a male primarily in your feminine, both of those can work in life. Now, the thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand around the feminine, they think that the feminine means like being receptive and passive and surrendering and waving a white flag and being soft. None of those really none of those come to mind when I describe the feminine. Yes, being in your feminine can mean you let go and you say, I trust you, universe. It can mean being receptive and in using and bringing in whatever life is giving you. It can be all of those things. But what the feminine is, in my lineage at least, is energy, purely energy. That's what it is, like, period. That is the definition of the feminine. It is energy. Whereas the masculine is consciousness. It is emptiness, time, space, a container. I am inside of this room right now that has four corners and it has walls. I am inside of a container. It's empty, it's just the walls, it's just the room, but I am inside of it. I am the energy. If you're watching this video, you see that I'm moving all around, and I've got colors, and I've got vines, and I've got mirrors hanging up on the wall. So I have added energy into this room, but besides all of the things that you see in here, it's just space. There's nothing else in it until we put something in it. And that's what the consciousness is. That is what the masculine is. So the masculine and the feminine live out physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. We can look at all these different ways that these two energies show up in our lives, and they're all very different. And so it takes years and years and years of studying to truly understand on every plane how they actually play out. And you've talked about embodiment, so we can talk about how these energies can be seen through our bodies, but then there's also like emotionally, there is an emotional feminine body and there is an emotional masculine body. So
Okay.
it's a very extensive topic, and we can look at it in so many ways, and how it is played out within ourselves, and then how it is played out with another person in the room. Because right now you're in the masculine. You're still. You are sitting directly in front of me, shoulders are facing me, and you're just perfectly still. And I'm like, blah, 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 like waving my hands, talking. You are listening. So you could say that in some way you are being very receptive, which feels very feminine, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's actually more of the masculine, because you are stillness. You are holding. You are listening, but you're more in your groundedness, whereas I am more in the energy and the talking. And then we're going to switch. And
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to be the one talking, and then I'm going to be the one still. So we have this dynamic happening every single moment, where one person is on one end, and that absolutely polarizes the other person to be on the other end. Does this mean it's always like this? No. You can have two very feminine beings. If me and my sister were to be together right now, you would see that we're both like very in our feminine, because we're interrupting each other when we talk. And we're both just like waving our hands everywhere. So like that would be two of the more primarily feminine energies being together. And then if you were to take maybe a room that had two brothers inside, and they're both sitting on recliners, and they're not talking because they just want to be empty, and they don't want to have any noise, they just want to be in silence, that would be like seeing what the masculine would be looking like played out, like, tangibly in these bodies. Does that land with you?
Yeah, that makes total
Okay.
sense. I love that.
So
Yeah.
many, it's so endless, and it's so fun. But whenever I have like the opportunity to just talk about it, I just go into all these different avenues. So feel free to just like rein me in.
Yeah, no, no, it's great. I love it. And I'm curious about the emotional masculine. What I've not heard
Mm,
you talk about that
mhm,
before.
mhm. So men, and I'm going to use men, okay?
Mhm.
So I want to make it very clear that, like I said earlier, you can be a male and have a very feminine emotional body, right? You can, and I'm going to talk about that. But for the sake of getting to the point, I'm going to primarily talk about men being in the masculine and female being in the feminine. Like that's our more natural state, even though we know it's not always the case for a
Right.
lot of people. But let's just say the majority of the example of men I'm talking about, they all have masculine emotional bodies. That means that typically, if there's something that's coming up in their life, there's a desire to solve it.
Mm, yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they have this experience in their life. Maybe there is a primarily feminine being, and she wants to unpack something, and she wants to look at, well, this happened, and then you said this, and I feel this, and now I feel this, and now I feel this, because we have so many different layers. Like the feminine body is so complex, with
Mm,
stories and pain bodies and beliefs and things that are living inside of our body we cannot even explain, and it's typically called intuition,
mm,
but it just lives there. And wisdom lives within the body, whereas knowledge lives within the mind. And wisdom is more like the moon. It is more of the feminine. So
ah,
we are full of wisdom. Like we just know when we're ready to make babies, or we just know when our period is coming, or we just know whenever it's not safe to walk down that street, whereas this street is okay. It's amazing. It's amazing. But also with knowing that, we have so many different layers of our emotions, which, if the feminine is energy, she is also chaos.
mm,
She can be a calm river. She can also be a roaring tsunami. it can show up in so many different ways. Whereas for the masculine, primarily masculine beings, if it's kind of like space and nothingness and a container, it's just it feels a bit more linear. It's like, here we are, there we want to be, let's walk this path. So emotionally, if you have a primarily masculine person in front of you, this is what's happening, here it is, okay, and we want this over here. Well, step A, B, and C. Like, their emotions are processed in a way that feels a little bit more logical.
That
Doesn't mean
makes
you don't
sense.
feel things, because whenever I go do these polarity workshops, the masculine beings that come, they feel things. They're there because they want a better relationship with their partner. They love to love.
Right.
But a primarily masculine being is more focused on purpose, whereas a primarily feminine being, this goes especially for partnership, she's focused more on love. So whoever is more concerned with the love in a relationship is in the feminine, and whoever is more concerned with the purpose of a relationship is in the masculine. And you can look at the same thing and put it in your emotions. Someone may be more driven by, I feel this way. This is what's coming up for me. Let's look at this and let's look at this. And then the other one might be like, okay, well, if this is what's happening, then this is what we need to do. Purpose driven.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. Okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. I can definitely relate to that. And, and one other thing that I had learned from the last retreat was that consciousness is actually a masculine trait. And I had not known that before. I thought that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, consciousness is the part, as John says, it's the part of you, the part of me, the part of everyone that has never changed. I
Right.
like
Okay.
I
Yeah.
like to think of it as like, I don't know what happens when we die, but I choose to think at this point in my life, I choose to think that there's like this ginormous, just like hub of souls. And it's just like, have you ever seen just like a big group of fish together in the
Yeah.
water, and they just form this really tight ball, but then every once in a while, kind of like one might swim away and just kind of detach. I imagine that our souls are like that, but like up in the
Yeah.
universe and in the galaxies, and it's just this big, like, bright light. And then whenever a soul's ready to be reincarnated, it's like, see ya, until it's like really completed its time, and then it just merges in that and it stays there forever. But I imagine like that orb is like the divine masculine. That's what it is. And then those souls come off, they come into planet Earth or whatever other planets have life on them, and then that's the part of us that's the masculine. It's like from the divine masculine orb of light. And I know I'm probably losing some people here. I'm just
No,
like,
I love that
it's
though.
how I
That's
think of
great.
it.
I like that
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah, that resonates with me. I hope that I mean, you got to just, somebody's going to resonate with it. Whoever's listening is going to resonate with it for sure. But I think it's good to think of things like that too, because again, like I've always felt that part of tapping it or kind of embodying my feminine is using my imagination more. And that was
Mm-hmm.
something that I had really, I call it my imagination muscle. I'd really like let that really atrophy for a while. And so I think that the more we can do that kind of thing and really, go outside the box of where we're thinking about like all the logic in the world, and just kind of use your imagination so that you can, go further than you ever have gone before. I feel like that is, it's going to help you step outside of your comfort zone and try new things. It's going to help you grow as a person. It's going to actually help you create visions that you possibly could come to fruition and manifest. And so there's so many things that could start just from really tapping into your imagination.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this, I love that you said that, because the child is the closest energy to the feminine besides the
Mm.
feminine herself. um, it is energy. If you look at a child, they are pure balls of energy. Like, they just have so much they want to talk about and do and see. And I think at the core of the feminine, it's very similar. Like, we're really lit up by all sorts of things in life. And the masculine energy, equal but opposite, it's lacking that. Doesn't mean, I'm not saying men lack that, but I'm saying the
Right.
masculine is not about that. The masculine is like the deeper we can go and the more serious we can go, the better. Whereas the feminine is like the lighter, the more lifted up, the more like expressive and
Mhm.
energy and joy and excitement and sensuality and just like feeling all the things. Like the masculine is not going to do that. The masculine is like,
Yeah.
that's what it is. And so
Yeah.
the child is very similar to that energy of just being like so expressive and so excited and so motivated by everything, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is, and I have to say that, like, the women, the group of women that I was with at your retreat, and we got to reunite a couple weekends back, and that's exactly what I felt like. It was like total embodiment of the feminine. We were just going through all these things, playing, having fun. It was light. It was just like the best time, and everybody was just, we were all laughing and being silly, and just, it was just, there was no, it was like you could see it as chaos, I guess, in some ways, but we always like ended up at the right place. There was no, it was interesting how it all happened. There was no like, nobody got disgruntled. It was like we all like, whenever we were looking for something, a restaurant or a store or anything, we just always ended up at the right place. And so it all just kind of, all the pieces just all fit together. And so that's kind of what I think of as when I'm around a lot of women, it helps me embody that part, because I was like never really allowed to be
Hmm.
super silly like that, or just kind of always had to act really like serious. I felt like, I guess maybe that was just me, um but then when I was allowed to play more as an adult, and felt like comfortable doing that, then that really helped me tap into my creative parts a little bit more, and just kind of like, again, embody some of those ranges of emotions. It's like trying on different clothes. Let's try this on for a bit, and see how this feels. And so it just makes life more fun, I think, when we go through it like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I had an example of something that happened today, and I was like, oh, this, I love those moments where you actually see you're growing and changing. You
Mhm.
like do something and it was totally without putting thought into it, and then you look back and you're like, wow, that's new. I wouldn't have done that before. But I've been working the past 2 years on really revealing my excitement. Like that's been something really important to me. It's like how much can I reveal what I feel on the inside? And a couple months ago when I went on a date and we had sushi, and I remember like I just, oh my gosh, I had like this one, like it was, I think it was like a salmon egg, and I remember I was just like, oh my god, this is so good. And he was just like, wow, it is? Tell me more, because he doesn't work that way. And he was just like, I love how he was so like enthralled by how enthralled I was. I brought a
Right.
sense of joy to something he wouldn't have registered as like that great, because it's just like business as usual, going to a sushi place on another date. And that was a moment for me to, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I was like, oh yay, like all this work of trying to express myself is starting to kind of come naturally. And then today I recorded a video with a friend and I rewatched it and I ended up loving it, and I started jumping up and down clapping, and I was just like, oh my god, I was just like full of so much joy, and I was clapping and I was like, oh, before I would have probably been like, oh, that's great, yeah, that thank you, that's wonderful, trying to be very prim and proper and like
Right.
so this is something that not all of us have to learn. Some of us never had that part of us repressed, and so it's very natural to be enthusiastic. But for a lot of people, if you feel like you don't have this natural ability to light up at a salmon egg or at seeing a video, that's okay. It's
Yeah.
honestly taken me 2 years of training myself. Like I would have moments where I would look at something that I like to look at and embody joy, and ask myself, okay, for the next 30 seconds, how can I reveal my excitement about this LaCroix? Like, how can I look at this LaCroix? It's pink, it's cold, it's a hot day here. How can I like be excited about it? And I would just be by myself for 30 seconds and be like, just like make up sounds and do things. And then over time, my nervous system
Hmm.
has learned how to do it. All I
Yeah.
had to do was practice, and then my nervous system that was storing the belief that I wasn't safe to reveal started to get it. and then realized, oh, I'm safe to show my pleasure. I'm safe to show my joy. And the
Yeah.
same thing can be said for pleasure sexually, or fear, or anger. Any emotion you have had repressed and cut off and shamed, set practice time to feel it, to go into it. And then your nervous system starts to say, oh, okay, we can welcome this back in.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And it is a repatterning of the nervous system for sure. Because if you, I think you were talking about in your last podcast about embodiment, about how we acquire these tallies in our life, like all this trauma, like it keeps building on each other, and beliefs and learning these things about from other people or feedback. And it's very true because, and then it's just kind of, and in the underlying it's there, but you're not always aware that it's there, and then you have these reactions, or or need to suppress, and then you're like, what's going on? How did I end up this way? And then you realize, oh shit, yeah, the world is kind of crazy, and we have to deal with a lot of stimulation, especially now. And so becoming aware and repatterning the nervous system, and starting to be able to relax and not worry about getting judged when you're just having an emotion, or getting excited
Hmm.
about something, or being yourself, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
being the silly blonde, or whatever. I'm talking about me.
Hmm.
Like that's something I've been embodying, because I think for a while, like I had expressed to you, I was really, my fear was to be, that I was going to look uh like a dumb blonde, or I was going to say something stupid, or I was going to come off like a ditz. But I actually started to embody that more, and not worry about so much what I was sounding like, how I was talking, what kind of words I was using, and just trusting myself more, and realize that it's okay. If even if I do sound like that, which sometimes my husband, I think I shared this with you, like I'll kind of say ditzy things sometimes, and he actually loves it because he's like, it just reminds me that it's of the spontaneity of you, and you're just in the moment, and you're funny, So I was like, wow, okay, I never knew that you would have gotten that from me being some parts of
Hmm.
myself coming out there, um so yeah, sometimes when we're not holding back, and we're actually just allowing ourselves to be ourselves, when we know ourselves a little better, and we know what that looks like, uh then I think that it can be a beautiful thing, and so many things can come out of that, and you'll it's kind of magical the way people respond to you, as opposed when you're being yourself, as opposed to when you're trying to hold back and try to be perfect,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how many different I think I talk about this on my podcast of, it's like every human being is like a castle.
Mm.
And there's all these doors that we have, like thousands of different doors that open up to different rooms, and life is an accumulation of people coming into our castle and saying, I don't like this room, lock up the door and throw out the key. And that's from Debbie Ford, is an author. She talks about that, about shadow sides. And this work is about going back into our castle and then finding those keys and simply unlocking the door, because every single room has something beautiful to offer, and it's different. And people, you had said, like, step into all these sides of you and don't be so afraid of what the judgments people will make about it. And it's important to also know that every single person, including us, have judgments, like, are so great. They help us to know who we feel is safe and who we feel is not safe, what avenue to go down career wise, or which one we want to pull away from, what's a sacred yes, what's a sacred no. Judgments are awesome. And when people judge us, it's only because of their judgments of what they've learned in their life from other people who have judged them. Like, we just have this hierarchy of what we think is okay and what we don't think is okay because of society. Society has built all of this, and society, like, lives inside of our minds, and that's how we say yes, no, weird, good, bad, all these things. The best thing we can do is not to wish all of that away, but
Mm.
rather to take a bird's eye view and just be aware of it. And, like,
Yeah.
be aware of how many times we have judgments. Like, I have judgment right now that I'm sweating so much, and my judgment is like, oh my gosh, what do I look like, blah blah blah. But the thing is, I can see that, I'm aware of it, I can see what's happening in my mind, and I think it makes it just so much less scary to reveal all these parts of ourselves, because whatever judgment someone were to have about me, if I was ditzy, if I went into my ditziness at a very serious event, let's say I'm at a very high stakes, and I say a question that's really ridiculous and stupid, and then they'll make all these judgments, it's because they've been told, everyone around me has been told in their entire lives from birth what to think about ditziness, and it's not my job to control their own thoughts about that. It's just my job to know I would rather be ditzy and free than to be
Right.
than to
Yeah.
not raise my hand out of fear that my question might sound dumb, because
Mhm.
then I become quiet. And then if I'm
Right.
quiet, what judgment will I have about being quiet? Like, it just leads into another judgment if we don't stop and just
Yeah.
allow it. Yeah.
I agree with that. That's a great point. That is a really great point. So you've got to just start trying, you got to start somewhere. And that's what I think that I've learned for sure is that you can't just, I'm not, doing nothing and staying silent wasn't working for me. So I'm doing something different now. Let me
Can I
pause for
can
a
I
second.
also add just
Yeah.
can I add one more
Yeah,
thing?
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Because, like, there's ditzy, and I also just want to, I want to point out how many different,
Yeah.
I'm not going to point out all the different shadow sides, but for other people listening, think about your sexuality and your intimacy.
All right.
Because we're being women, we're raised from birth, I could say all of us have been told at some point, oh, that girl's a slut, or that girl's loose. Like, we've heard, whether at school or as adults, we've heard another woman be shamed for her sexuality.
Mhm.
And for many of us, we were also in on it. It was camaraderie. It's like a group of women shaming another woman for being a slut, or with guys, with men, shaming another person for being a slut or whore or loose or whatever. And it was almost as if we were being invited in to have camaraderie around it. Like, let's all collectively shame this person for her sexuality and bond over it. And we didn't know this. Like, whenever we're 13 years old and we're starting to hear this kind of chit chat, all we're really realizing is, oh, we're being invited in to create a friendship here by looking at another person and putting them down.
Mhm.
This all needs to change, right? Of course, this needs to change, this dynamic. And I think we're doing a great job moving in that direction of making women feel more sexually empowered. And I'm not in the school system, but hopefully it's getting better
It
for
is.
them as
Yeah.
well. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, you've got kids, so you can see what's happening there. But yeah, so our nervous system starts to create this response. It's living within our bodies. Our bodies start to say, oh, if you have sex in this way or at this age, or if people know about it, if, then you are XYZ, and those things are typically bad. Then you are a slut, and that's bad. Then you are loose, and no one will want you, right? And
Yeah.
I had my own
Right.
stories growing up around being raised very religious, of like, if you sleep with someone before you're married, your husband will be very disappointed in you, and he might
Mm.
not want you anymore, and he might not marry you after he finds out. So my body was like, and I remember when I would when I started sleeping with people, I my body was like obsessive about like counting, like, make sure it doesn't get above this number, because if it's above this number, my future husband won't love me anymore. That was in my body, and it led to anxiety and eating disorders. Like, it was a huge part of why I was quiet. I needed to rely on counting calories to feel safe. All these different things all came from these judgments that my body was learning about and hiding from. And in order to not look a certain way, we start holding back in all ways that even look like that. So for people who struggle with, for anyone who is really afraid they look like a slut, I'm just gonna stick with that word, really afraid they look like a slut, they might not want to be physical with their partner, they might not be physical with themselves, they might not want to use any particular kind of language, all because if they go in those arenas, they'll be touching that territory.
Mm.
So I actually have played a lot with the energy of the sacred slut. Like, how slutty can I feel with myself? Just, in the comfort of my own room, my own home. I'm like, can I be a sacred slut with me, and welcome this side of me, the side of me that, like, wants to be a slut to the divine and to God. And I want to be so freaking loose and open to let all of this love from the universe and the divine and God inside me. Like that to me is holy, to be such a surrendered woman that the divine is going to devour me. And like, I'm available to the divine 24/7. Like anytime you want me, divine God, you can have me. And like, this is advanced level. So this isn't just like something that, people might feel very triggered hearing me use these words and throwing in the word God alongside something like the word slut. But like that has helped me so much just to feel like okay with the part of me that is sexually empowered. Doesn't mean I go out and do anything. Doesn't mean I'm then like, okay, now I'm open for business to all people. It means I heal. I opened a door and no action is necessary. The only thing that changed is mentally I accept another part of me that once I didn't.
Mm.
More love.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, and it's about like where you're at with that, your awareness around it, your intention behind it, and of course, like you mentioned, the trigger for some people, like that might be a trigger for some people when they were younger. Either they were the slut, or they saw how someone was treated when they were the so-called slut, and it is kind of an outcast kind of, I guess, label,
Mm.
from the group in a way. But I really, I have faith that it's changing. And I think as women, as we become more empowered and start to embody more of these emotions and archetypes, in our lives, it becomes more acceptable to be more free and open, I think, in the sexual realm. Anyway, that's what I've seen. I don't know. I think there's still a lack of maturity at that age for sure, as far as like with the emotional parts. But it seems like they're a little bit further ahead than I was at that
Mm.
age for sure. But yeah, I mean, I was definitely a slut when I went to college. I mean, I was it's just, but it was more of a self-destructive and more of like I think a disconnect for me. I was trying to really disconnect from my body,
Mm.
so for me that's what it was about. And so for me to be able to, I'm with you, like to be able to embody that now as an adult, and also being from the South, and like around a lot of religious stuff. My family wasn't super religious, but it was around that, and so I think that a lot of the I guess thoughts around sex, it just uh, it was that it was bad, and I got in trouble the first time I had sex. Um,
Mm.
and it was a terrible experience. I was so excited to tell my mom about it, and then she told my dad, and my dad got really mad at me. So, and I think it was just because he wanted to protect me, and so I see that, now. But at the time, it was like, gosh, I did something bad. Okay, well, if this is bad, then I'll just keep doing it because I want to be bad now, because
Mm.
I didn't really have a chance to do that. So, but yeah, to be able to embody that openness, the freedom in your own body, and to have that available for someone you really want to be with and you really love and cherish, or whoever it is, really, it's up to you.
Mhm.
Then I think that's a beautiful thing, really.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. If we are not looking at the judgments we have about the parts of ourselves, then many of our actions are tainted by that. If we are terrified to be even looking remotely like a slut, some of the times we say yes to being with certain people, it might actually be a no. We don't really know because parts of ourselves aren't really present. They've been
Mm.
shut off, and vice versa. Um, so yeah, it's just this work goes so deep, and I think the more you start to embrace and adopt and bring in all these different parts of you, the more your no's really are no's to certain things in your life, and the more your yeses really are yeses. It's coming from a clean place. a place where all the parts of you are helping decide if something really feels good or not. You're not just tiptoeing around a certain event or an aspect in order because you're afraid, like, if I say yes, will I look like this? Or if I say no, like, will I look like this?
Right.
I have this idea in my head that I'm trying to like formulate, but I'm having a hard time like putting it to words of what I'm trying to say specifically about this, other than it's really powerful stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, like you mentioned, with knowing your yes and knowing your no, I'm again, that comes up in the body, right? So the body is, if you're in tune with it, it's not going to lie. It's going to tell you where you stand with that. Like, I know for me, I can feel the restriction in my body when I'm doing something that I don't really feel like is for me, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying yes to something that I don't really feel like uh, this is like what I should be doing right now. So, and then I'm excited, but I may be a little scared, but I'm excited, and feel really drawn towards something in my body that I know that I want to say yes to. So, those are ways that we can really start to get more in touch with the body and become aware of what it's telling us. And so I work with a lot of people on a physical level in a gym setting, and a lot of people coming from injuries and lots of restriction, and trying to open those areas up and mobilize again. And I'm really just helping people read their own bodies, and start to get to know themselves a little bit better, and really discover what their bodies are telling them. And so every day when I check in with people, I say, how's your body today? How's it feeling? What's it telling you? So again, starting to communicate with your body that way, I think, is really helpful, because it is very wise. There's a lot of wisdom, like you said, in the body.
Mm-hmm.
So true self-care, in my opinion, is learning how to take care of yourself. Authentic self-care. So what does authentic self-care mean to you, Maddie? And like, how do you actually, what kind of things do you do on a daily basis to really give yourself what you need?
Mm. Authentic self-care. Well, when I think of authentic, I think of what's like the deeper layer to something. So, self-care could be making my bed and feeding my body nourishment and food on time, and um, giving myself plenty of space in order to take care of my all the different realms of my health, physically, mentally, all that. But then like authentic self-care, when I go a little bit deeper, it's like a moment to moment basis of like, what do I need now? What do I need now? What do I need now? Like, and allowing that to happen, making space for that. Someone once told me, whatever comes up, make space for it, make room for it. That's been like my motto in life. And I think that's what the deepest layer of self-care is. It's whatever comes up, make room for it. You're having a panic attack in the middle of a business meeting, make room for it. Your body says no in the middle of sex, make room for it. You're hungry at the like least uh opportune time, like where you shouldn't be hungry because you got to go do something, make room for it. Doesn't mean you have to act on something immediately, but emotionally make space for what is present. And I think that is like the highest act of self-care, of truly just making room for you, your dits, your sacred slut, like whatever is coming up, making room for that. Because too often we feel a sensation or an emotion and we try to cover it up and pretend it's not there and move on. It's the opposite of making room for it.
Hmm.
So yeah, like recently I've been making room for so many things in my life. One of them, the biggest thing that I've been making room for, is there's just been this pivot in my business that I haven't been able to put a finger on. I
Hmm.
haven't known, I've been feeling it coming for the past 365 days. Like it's just been like this really long time coming inkling that something felt like it was out of alignment. And I finally was just like, all right, making room for it. What is it? What is it, universe? Tell me what it is. And the universe was like, Madeline, we're not going to tell you yet. You're just now finally admitting it. We've been trying to tell you that for years. So now you're at this point and now you've got to wait. You got to wait to see what the next thing is or what feels out of alignment. And so I've made room for like the mystery of like what's working, what's not working, what feels good, what doesn't. In my business as a whole, I love. There's just certain aspects that haven't felt in alignment with who I am now.
Mm.
And, you know, one of them you probably heard if you listen to that podcast. I'm doing more like solo episodes. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
doing interviews really. And that's a big change. I haven't done that. You know, it's been 5 years of doing that show. And I've always had this like story in my life of I'm a great interviewer. I love interviewing. I'm always going to be an interviewer. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like not interested in anyone. Like, I don't want to know anybody's life right now. I just want to teach. And
Yeah.
that I wasn't making room for that because I wasn't slowing down enough to listen. I kept scheduling people.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I would start to notice every time I put someone's name in my calendar and I sent them the Google invite, my body closed.
Mm.
And I was like, but this person's great. Like, why do I feel this way? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's because I just don't want to ask questions. And so
Right.
the minute I realized that though, and I got specific, the universe was like, this is what that problem is. I was like, all right, I'm gonna make room for it. Let's just try it out. And if I end up wanting to go back to that, then super easy. All I have
Right.
to do is send an email and schedule someone.
That's right.
So yeah, things like that. But then also making room for just like the day to day, like making room for a good cry,
Mm.
making room for like in the middle of a subway, you know, when everyone else is like being weird and quiet or staring, like just if I need to do horse lips, like I'm going to do horse lips, like just whatever is coming up and saying, okay, let's just give this a try and see what happens.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. That's so great. Yeah, that's the best answer. I love that because that's what I've been doing a lot of too, just trying to give myself, or not trying, but giving myself space to feel, to tap into what I need to. I've even like taken a whole complete day off just to go hiking,
Mm-hmm.
and that has been like the best. And so yeah, just and I think I hear people say this a lot, like I didn't have time to do this, or it's all about not having enough time. But I think it's more about prioritizing and really focusing on what you really want to focus on to create that life for yourself and to create the best case scenario or whatever you want to create. And so uh I think just starting with that, just slowing down, like you said, just even creating space to even know where you are at, with your process, because it constantly changes too. So I know I go through many changes in my business as well, and kind of where I want to focus, and a lot of things stay the same, but there's a lot of things that also just really are just changing all the time. And so yeah, if we're not
Yeah.
slowing down enough, we can't really see that.
I think that's something people don't talk about enough. Like what you just said, that we're constantly changing. Like we hear that, right? But we don't
Mhm.
actually think about that. And I truly believe when we started this interview, I was a different woman than I am right now. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
like
right.
I
Yeah.
think we change second to second. We really do. And yeah, it's really been empowering for me to allow myself to have that mindset of like the way I ate yesterday might be something of the past. Like
Right.
I want to eat a completely different way because I'm a different woman. Like I really do think it's
Mhm.
more fun to think that way. I think it's so
Yeah.
much more fun because life is so short that if you just adopt the mindset that you're supposed to be the same way or you need to have the same clothes. I had an interview with a woman named Stacia Savasuk.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Highly recommend you
Okay.
look into her. She's just amazing, and she's all about style. And she has a TED Talk.
Oh
Start with
yes,
the
I
TED
did
Talk.
see. I don't. I think I listened to that interview and I saw her TED Talk.
Mm,
Actually, I listened to her TED Talk. Yeah.
okay, she's one of those people. You know, you just see people and you're like, you're a soulmate, and
Mm.
she's like that. But she talks about how she always buys thrift clothing because she might want to completely do her wardrobe like the next day. She's changing as a
Yeah.
woman every single moment. So like she buys thrift clothes that way she easily can give things up, bring things in, give things up, bring things in. And I love that mindset because when I look at my closet, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I bought this just yesterday, but I've actually had this for 3 years. And it's no
Mm.
surprise it doesn't work with my vibe anymore. And my mind's like, but Melanie, you spent money on it. You should wear it. You should. I'm like, no, I'm actually very different of a human. And I like putting that on. Like that mindset for everything, the books that I read, the music I listen to, and just allow space for change,
Yeah.
making room for whatever's coming up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's that's wonderful. Yeah, and like you can do that with your feelings too. You don't have to identify with all of them as they come up, or if you get triggered, or if you get or your feelings hurt. You can just say, "Oh yeah," acknowledge it and let it move through as well. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, well, we're coming up on the hour, and I really so appreciate you coming on the show and spending the time with me today, Maddie. I'd really love for you to share with everybody more information about what you have coming up. You have your embodied archetype retreat in New York coming up, which I'm going to go to, and I'm so excited. I
Yes.
cannot wait.
Oh, I'm so excited for this. I haven't been so excited for an event like this event, and I mean, the feminine surrender is like my baby and I love it, but this is so new and it's just so different. Um, yeah, so everyone can find me at maddymoon.com, and then my podcast is Mind Body Musings. That's on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Then the event that we're talking about is called the Embodied Archetype, and basically we are going to be taking shadow sides, what we've been talking about, like the ditzy, the whatever, we're not going to probably go into the sacred slot. We're going to go into like things like the Queen or Joan of Arc if you struggle with speaking your truth, or uh, who am I thinking of? Whatever, just a whole bunch of different archetypes. We've got tons that we're going to be working with. But whatever your main shadow side is that you're struggling with embracing, accepting, we're going to use storytelling by having one of these characters designated to you. And you're going to become that character over the weekend, basically, and everything that you do so that you can start to embrace this part of you through the act of storytelling by becoming a different character, because something about becoming a different character allows you to have this container to
Mhm.
play with this energy, and it's not quite as scary or daunting as just like, all right, Allison, now you're going to be this this ditz right here, just it's forever and ever and ever, when it's going to be a weekend and you've got this particular framework to work with. Going into that archetype becomes like exciting and it becomes less daunting. And so we're creating this really beautiful, nourishing, safe container for playing with these archetypes through storytelling and through clearing our throat chakra, lots of different chakra play, and then embodiment, feminine embodiment, masculine embodiment. And this is going to be in Brooklyn, November 15th to 17th. So if anyone is interested, y'all can certainly reach out. There is more information about that at maddymoon.com/events.
Nice. Well, thanks, Maddie. Again, so great to see you. Great to spend time with you. And thanks for sharing your wisdom with all my
Mm,
listeners today.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.